Hello friends. Every once in a while, a movie comes along that doesn't just end when the credits roll, it follows you out of the theater, sticks in your head, and quietly asks you to decide how you really feel about it. Today we're talking about a film that's been building hype long before its release and has already sparked strong reactions from audiences and critics alike. Going in, I had expectations shaped by the trailer, the cast, and all the online buzz, but what I got was something far more layered, surprising, and occasionally frustrating. This is a movie that takes big swings with its story, leans heavily on its performances, and isn't afraid to make choices that might divide people. So the real question isn't just whether it is good or bad, it's whether the risks it takes actually pay off, and if it's a movie you'll still be thinking about long after it's over. Let's get into it. 300 is a 2006 American epic historical action film directed by Zack Snyder, who co-wrote the screenplay with Kurt Johnstad and Michael B. Gordon. It is based on the 1998 Dark Horse comic book limited series of the same name by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley. The film, like its source material, is a fictionalized retelling of the Battle of Thermopylae in the Greco-Persian Wars. The plot revolves around King Leonidas, Gerard Butler, who leads 300 Spartans into battle against the Persian god King Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro, and his invading army of more than 300,000 soldiers. As the battle rages, Queen Gorgo, Lena Headey, attempts to rally support in Sparta for her husband. The film also features Michael Fassbender in his film debut. The story is framed by a voice-over narrative by the Spartan soldier Dilios, David Wenham. As an unreliable narrator, Dilios introduces various historical inaccuracies and other fantastical elements, placing 300 within the genre of historical fantasy. 300 was filmed mostly with a superimposition chroma key technique to replicate the imagery of the original comics. An unfinished cut of 300 premiered at the Austin Butnamathon on 9 December 2006. The completed film then premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival on 14 February 2007, before being released in both conventional and IMAX screens in the United States on March 9, and on home media on 31 July. The film received generally positive reviews from critics, who praised its visuals and style but received criticism from historians, who criticized its historical inaccuracies, most notably its depiction of the Persians, which some characterized as Persophobic. Grossing over $468.8 million, the film's opening was the 24th largest in box office history at the time, and became the 10th highest grossing film of 2007. The film earned a leading 10 nominations at the 34th Saturn Awards, winning 2 for Best Action, Adventure, or Thriller Film and Best Director, for Snyder. A sequel, titled Rise of an Empire, based on Miller's previously unpublished graphic novel King Xerxes, was released on 7 March 2014. Dilios, a hoplite in the Spartan army, narrates the story of a Spartan king named Leonidas I from childhood to kingship through the Spartan child-rearing system and the Battle of Thermopylae. A Persian herald arrives at Sparta one day, urging Leonidas to present an offering of earth and water as a token of submission to King Xerxes. Leonidas and the Spartan soldiers decline, throwing the herald, who insulted Queen Gorgo, and his envoy into a bottomless pit. Visiting the Iphas, Leonidas proposes driving back the Persians through Thermopylae by funneling them into a narrow pass, giving the Greeks' heavy infantry the advantage over the numerically superior Persian light infantry. The Iphas warn Leonidas that Sparta should not wage war during the upcoming Carnia and consult the oracle, who corroborates their advice. As Leonidas angrily departs, an agent from Xerxes appears alongside a Spartan politician, Theron, rewarding the Ephors for their covert support. Having been denied permission to mobilize Sparta's army, Leonidas gathers 300 soldiers, with many of them leaving behind sons to carry on their name. Theron and the council confront Leonidas and his men about defying the Ephors. Leonidas denies going to war, yet they depart for the Hot Gates shortly afterwards. Joined by a few thousand Arcadians and their leader Daxos along with other Greeks, they reach Thermopylae, watching a storm sinking many Persian navy ships at the Aegean Sea. The Spartans then scout out a large Persian encampment and construct a wall, using slain Persian scouts as mortar. Meanwhile, Leonidas encounters Ephialtes, a deformed Spartan whose parents fled Sparta to spare him certain infanticide. Ephialtes warns him of a secret goat path the Persians could use to outflank and surround the Spartans. Although sympathetic, Leonidas rejects him since his deformity could compromise the phalanx formation. The battle begins soon after the Spartans' refusal to lay down their weapons. Using the narrowed pathway, the Spartans repel many waves of the advancing Persian army, suffering no casualties. Xerxes personally approaches Leonidas and offers him immense wealth and power if he surrenders. Leonidas declines, mocking the inferior quality of Xerxes' warriors. Xerxes sends in his elite guard, the Immortals, accompanied by the monstrous Uber-Immortal, but the Greeks once again triumph, suffering only a few Spartan casualties. On the second day, Xerxes unsuccessfully dispatches new waves of armies against the Spartans, including war elephants, bombardiers, and an armored rhinoceros. Meanwhile, an embittered Ephialtes, having defected to Xerxes, reveals the secret path in exchange for wealth, women, and a uniform. During the fight, Leonidas' loyal captain and friend Artemis suffers a personal tragedy when his eldest son Astynos is decapitated, forcing him to violently break formation and responsively kill a group of Persians in a vengeful, murderous rage. The Arcadians retreat upon learning of Ephialtes' betrayal, but the Spartans choose to stay. Leonidas orders an injured but reluctant Dilios to return to Sparta and inform his compatriots of what has happened. Queen Gorgo approaches Theron for help, having been permitted to make her plea to the Spartan council to reinforce the 300 Spartan soldiers making their last stand, but Theron rapes her in exchange for his needed assistance, and the following day, he betrays her and attempts to defame her as an adulteress before the council. Enraged, Gorgo kills Theron, revealing a bag of Xerxes' gold in his robe. Acknowledging his betrayal, the council unanimously agrees to send reinforcements. On the third day, the Persians, led by Ephialtes, traverse the secret path, encircling the Spartans. Xerxes' general again demands their surrender, but the Spartans refuse, and a young, spirited and highly skilled Spartan soldier named Stylized kills the general. Angered, Xerxes orders his troops to attack. Leonidas throws his spear at Xerxes, slicing his face to prove the god-king's mortality. Leonidas and the remaining Spartans fight to the last man until they finally succumb to an arrow barrage. Inspired by Leonidas' sacrifice and Dilios' testimony before the Spartan council, the Greeks mobilize an army, with Dilios heading the Spartan-led charge. After delivering a rousing emotional speech honoring King Leonidas and the 300 who sacrificed their lives a year prior, Dilios leads the Greeks into the Battle of Plataea against the Persians. Gerard Butler as Leonidas, King of Sparta. David Wenham as Dilios, narrator and Spartan soldier. Lena Headey as Queen Gorgo, Queen of Sparta. Giovanni Cimino as Pleistachus, son of Leonidas and Gorgo. Dominic West as Theron, a fictional corrupt Spartan politician. Vincent Regan as Captain Artemis, Leonidas' loyal captain and friend. Tom Wisdom as Astynos, Captain Artemis's eldest son. Andrew Plevin as Daxos, an Arcadian leader who joins forces with Leonidas. Andrew Tiernan as Ephialtes, a deformed Spartan outcast and traitor. Rodrigo Santoro as King Xerxes, the powerful and ruthless godlike king of Persia. Stephen McHattie as the Loyalist, a loyal Spartan politician. Michael Fassbender as Stelios, a young, spirited and highly skilled Spartan soldier. Peter Mensa as a Persian messenger who gets kicked into the well by Leonidas. Kelly Craig as Pythia, an oracle to the Iphas. Eli Snyder as young Leonidas, 7/8 years old. Tyler Neitzel as young Leonidas, 15 years old. Robert Maillet as Uber Immortal, Giant, a muscular and deranged immortal who battles Leonidas during the immortal fight. Patrick Sabangi as the Persian general who tries to convince Leonidas to comply at the end of the battle. Leon Laderack as Executioner, a hulking, clawed man who executes Xerxes' own men. Tyrone Benskin as the whip-wielding Persian emissary. Producer Gianni Nunnery was not the only person planning a film about the Battle of Thermopylae, as director Michael Mann had already planned a film of the battle based on the book Gates of Fire. Nunnery discovered Frank Miller's graphic novel 300, which impressed him enough to acquire the film rights. 300 was jointly produced by Nunnery and Mark Canton while Michael B. Gordon wrote the script. Director Zack Snyder was hired in June 2004 as he had attempted to make a film based on Miller's novel before making his debut with the remake of Dawn of the Dead. Snyder then had screenwriter Kurt Johnstad rewrite Gordon's script for production and Frank Miller was retained as consultant and executive producer. Frank Miller's original graphic novel 300 was inspired by the film The 300 Spartans, which Miller first saw at age 6. The film is a shot-for-shot adaptation of the comic book, similar to the 2005 film adaptation of Sin City. Snyder photocopied panels from the comic book, from which he planned the preceding and succeeding shots. "It was a fun process for me, to have a frame as a goal to get to," he said. Like the comic book, the adaptation also used the character Dilios as a narrator. Snyder used this narrative technique to show the audience that the surreal Frank Miller world of 300 was told from a subjective perspective. By using Dilios' gift of storytelling, he was able to introduce fantasy elements into the film, explaining that Dilios is a guy who knows how not to wreck a good story with truth. Snyder also added the subplot in which Queen Gorgo attempts to rally support for Leonidas. Above, a scene during filming. Below, the finished scene. 2 months of pre-production were required to create hundreds of shields, spears and swords, some of which were recycled from Troy and Alexander. Creatures were designed by Joe Duskel, and an animatronic wolf and 13 animatronic horses were created. The actors trained alongside the stuntmen, and even Snyder joined in. Upwards of 600 costumes were created for the film, as well as extensive prosthetics for various characters and the corpses of Persian soldiers. Sean Smith and Mark Rappaport worked hand in hand with Snyder in pre-production to design the look of the individual characters, and to produce the prosthetic makeup effects, props, weapons and dummy bodies required for the production. 300 entered active production on the 17th of October, 2005, in Montreal, and was shot over the course of 60 days in chronological order with a budget of $60 million. Employing the digital backlot technique, Snyder shot at the now-defunct Isostorm Studios in Montreal using blue screens. Gerard Butler said that while he did not feel constrained by Snyder's direction, fidelity to the comic imposed certain limitations on his performance. David Wenham said there were times when Snyder wanted to precisely capture iconic moments from the comic book, and other times when he gave actors freedom to explore within the world and the confines that had been set. Lena Headey said of her experience with the blue screens, "It's very odd, and emotionally, there's nothing to connect to apart from another actor. Only one scene, in which horses travel across the countryside, was shot outdoors. The film was an intensely physical production, and Butler pulled an arm tendon and developed foot drop. Post-production was handled by Montreal's Meteor Studios, and hybrid technologies filled in the blue screen footage with more than 1,500 visual effects shots. Visual effects supervisor Chris Watts and production designer Jim Bissell created a process dubbed the Crush, which allowed the Meteor artists to manipulate the colors by increasing the contrast of light and dark. Certain sequences were desaturated and tinted to establish different moods. Ghislaine St. who led the team of artists, described the effect, "Everything looks realistic, but it has a kind of a gritty illustrative feel." Various computer programs, including Maya, RenderMan, and RealFlow, were used to create the spraying blood. The post-production lasted for a year and was handled by a total of 10 special effects companies. Main article, 300 Original Motion Picture Soundtrack. In July 2005, composer Tyler Bates began work on the film, describing the score as having beautiful themes on the top and large choir, but tempered with some extreme heaviness. The composer had scored for a test scene that the director wanted to show to Warner Brothers to illustrate the path of the project. Bates said that the score had a lot of weight and intensity in the low end of the percussion that Snyder found agreeable to the film. The score was recorded at Abbey Road Studios and features the vocals of Azam Ali. A standard edition and a special edition of the soundtrack containing 25 tracks was released on the 6th of March, 2007, with the special edition containing a 16-page booklet and 3 two-sided trading cards. The score has caused some controversy in the film composer community, garnering criticism for its striking similarity to several other recent soundtracks, including James Horner and Gabriel Yed's work for the film Troy. The heaviest borrowings are said to be from Elliot Goldenthal's 1999 score for Titus. Remember Us, from 300, is identical in parts to the finale from Titus, and Returns a King is similar to the Q Victor's Titus. On the 3rd of August 2007, Warner Brothers Pictures acknowledged in an official statement. A number of the music cues for the score of 300 were, without our knowledge or participation, derived from music composed by Academy Award-winning composer Elliot Goldenthal for the motion picture Titus. Warner Brothers Pictures has great respect for Elliot, our longtime collaborator, and is pleased to have amicably resolved this matter. The official 300 website was launched by Warner Brothers in December 2005. The conceptual art and Zack Snyder's production blog were the initial attractions of the site. Later, the website added video journals describing production details, including comic-to-screen shots and the creatures of 300. In January 2007, the studio launched a MySpace page for the film. The Art Institutes created a microsite to promote the film. At San Diego Comic-Con in July 2006, the 300 panel aired a promotional teaser trailer of the film, which was positively received. Despite stringent security, the trailer was subsequently leaked on the internet. Warner Brothers released the official trailer for 300 on the 4th of October 2006. And later on it made its debut on Apple.com, where it received considerable exposure. The background music used in the trailers was Just Like You Imagined by 9 Inch Nails. A second 300 trailer, which was attached to Apocalypto, was released in theaters on the 8th of December 2006, and online the day before. On the 22nd of January, 2007, an exclusive trailer for the film was broadcast during primetime television. The trailers have been credited with igniting interest in the film and contributing to its box office success. In April 2006, Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment announced its intention to make a PlayStation portable game, 300, March to Glory, based on the film. Collision Studios worked with Warner Bros. To capture the style of the film in the video game, which was released simultaneously with the film in the United States. The National Entertainment Collectibles Association produced a series of action figures based on the film, as well as replicas of weapons and armor. Warner Bros. Promoted 300 by sponsoring the Ultimate Fighting Championship's light heavyweight champion Chuck Liddell, who made personal appearances and participated in other promotional activities. The studio also joined with the National Hockey League to produce a 30-second TV spot promoting the film in tandem with the Stanley Cup playoffs. In August 2006, Warner Bros. Announced 300's release date as the 16th of March, 2007, but in October the release was moved forward to the 9th of March, 2007. An unfinished cut of 300 was shown at Bucknamathon Film Festival on the 9th of December, 2006. 300 was released on DVD, Blu-ray disc, and HD DVD on the 31st of July, 2007, in Region 1 territories, in both single-disc and two-disc editions. 300 was released in single-disc and steel-case two-disc editions on DVD, BD and HD DVD in Region 2 territories beginning August 2007. On the 21st of July, 2009, Warner Bros. Released a new Blu-ray disc entitled 300, The Complete Experience to coincide with the Blu-ray disc release of Watchmen. This new Blu-ray disc is encased in a 40-page digibook and includes all the extras from the original release as well as some new ones. These features include a picture-in-picture feature entitled The Complete 300, a comprehensive immersion, which enables the viewer to view the film in 3 different perspectives. This release also includes a digital copy. An Ultra HD Blu-ray edition of the film was released on the 6th of October, 2020. On the 9th of July, 2007, American cable channel TNT bought the rights to broadcast the film from Warner Bros. TNT started airing the film in September 2009. Sources say that the network paid between $17 million and just under $20 million for the broadcasting rights. TNT agreed to a 3-year deal instead of the more typical 5-year deal. 300 was released in North America on the 9th of March, 2007, in both conventional and IMAX theaters. It grossed $28,106,731 on its opening day and ended its North American opening weekend with $70,885,301, breaking the record held by Ice Age, The Meltdown for the biggest opening weekend in the month of March and for a spring release. Since then 300's spring release record was broken by Fast and Furious and 300's March record was broken by Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. 300's opening weekend gross is the 24th highest in box office history, coming slightly below The Lost World, Jurassic Park but higher than Transformers. It was the 3rd biggest opening for an R-rated film ever, behind The Matrix Reloaded, $91.8 million, and The Passion of the Christ, $83.8 million. The film also set a record for IMAX cinemas with a $3.6 million opening weekend. The film grossed $468,879,361 worldwide. 300 opened 2 days earlier, on the 7th of March, 2007, in Sparta, and across Greece on March 8. Studio executives were surprised by the showing, which was twice what they had expected. They credited the film's stylized violence, the strong female role of Queen Gorgo, which attracted a large number of women, and a MySpace advertising blitz. Producer Mark Canton said, "MySpace had an enormous impact, but it has transcended the limitations of the internet or the graphic novel. Once you make a great movie, word can spread very quickly." The film received a standing ovation at its world premiere in front of 1,700 audience members at the Berlin International Film Festival on 14 February 2007. It had been panned at a press screening hours earlier, where many attendees left during the showing and those who remained booed at the end. As of July 2024, on Rotten Tomatoes, the film had an approval rating of 61% based on 238 reviews, with an average rating of 6 October 2010. The site's critical consensus reads, "A simple-minded but visually exciting experience, full of blood, violence, and ready-made movie quotes." As of October 2020, on Metacritic, the film had a weighted average score of 52 out of 100, based on 42 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A and to F scale. Some of the most unfavorable reviews came from major American newspapers. O. Scott of the New York Times described 300 as about as violent as Apocalypto and twice as stupid, and he also criticized its color scheme and suggested that its plot includes racist undertones. Scott also poked fun at the buffed bodies of the actors who portrayed the Spartans, declaring that the Persian characters are pioneers in the art of face piercing, and declaring that the actors who played the Spartans had access to superior health clubs and electrolysis facilities. Kenneth Tran wrote in the Los Angeles Times that unless you love violence as much as a Spartan, Quentin Tarantino, or a video game-playing teenage boy, you will not be endlessly fascinated. Roger Ebert gave the film a 2 out of 4 rating, writing that 300 has one-dimensional caricatures who talk like professional wrestlers plugging their next feud. Some critics employed at Greek newspapers have been particularly critical, such as film critic Robbie Exiel, who said that moviegoers would be dazzled by the digital action but also feel irritated by the pompous interpretations and one-dimensional characters. Variety's Todd McCarthy described the film as visually arresting although bombastic, while Kirk Honeycutt, writing in The Hollywood Reporter, praised the beauty of its topography, colors and forms. Writing in the Chicago Sun-Times, Richard Roeper acclaimed 300 as the Citizen Kane of cinematic graphic novels. Empire gave the film 3 out of 5, writing, "Visually stunning, thoroughly belligerent and as shallow as a pygmy's paddling pool. This is a whole heap of style tinged with just a smidgen of substance." Comic book resources Mark Cronin found the film compelling, leaving him with a feeling of power, from having been witness to something grand. IGN's Todd Gilchrist acclaimed Zack Snyder as a cinematic visionary and a possible redeemer of modern movie-making. At the 2007 MTV Movie Awards, 300 was nominated for Best Movie, Best Performance for Gerard Butler, Best Breakthrough Performance for Lena Headey, Best Villain for Rodrigo Santoro, and Best Fight for Leonidas battling the Uber-Immortal, but only won the award for Best Fight. 300 won both the Best Dramatic Film and Best Action Film honors in the 2006-2007 Golden Icon Awards presented by Travolta Family Entertainment. In December 2007, 300 won IGN's Movie of the Year 2007, along with Best Comic Book Adaptation and King Leonidas as Favorite Character. The movie received 10 nominations for the 2008 Saturn Awards, winning the awards for Best Director and Best Action/Adventure/Thriller film. In 2009, National Review magazine ranked 300 number 5 on its 25 best conservative movies of the last 25 years list. In the actual Battle of Thermopylae, the Spartans had already joined an alliance with other Greek police against the Persians. During the Battle of Thermopylae, Xerxes' invasion of Greece coincided with a Spartan religious festival, the Carnia, in which the Spartans were not permitted to make war. Still, realizing the threat of the Persians and not wanting to appear as Persian sympathizers, the Spartan government, rather than Leonidas alone, decided to send Leonidas with his personal 300-strong bodyguard to Thermopylae. Other Greek police joined the 300 Spartan men and totaled somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 total Greek troops. The historical consensus among both ancient chroniclers and current scholars was that Thermopylae was a clear Greek defeat, and the Persian invasion would be pushed back only in later ground and naval battles. The films depicts the Battle of Thermopylae as the 300 Spartans fighting the Persian army. Since few records on the actual martial arts used by the Spartans survive aside from accounts of formations and tactics, the fight choreography, led by the stunt coordinator and fight choreographer Damon Caro, was a synthesis of different weapon arts with Filipino martial arts as the base. Paul Cartledge, professor of Greek history at Cambridge University, advised the filmmakers on the pronunciation of Greek names and said that they made good use of his published work on Sparta. He praised the film for its portrayal of the Spartans' heroic code and of the key role played by women in backing up, indeed reinforcing, the male martial code of heroic honor, but he expressed reservations about its West, goodies, vs East, baddies, polarization. Cartledge wrote that he enjoyed the film but found Leonidas' description of the Athenians as boy lovers ironic since the Spartans themselves incorporated institutional pederasty into their educational system. Ephraim Lytle, assistant professor of Hellenistic history at the University of Toronto, said that 300 selectively idealized Spartan society in a problematic and disturbing fashion and portrayed the 100 nations of the Persians as monsters and non-Spartan Greeks as weak. He suggested that the film's moral universe would have seemed as bizarre to ancient Greeks as it does to modern historians. Lytle also commented, Ephialtes, who betrays the Greeks, is likewise changed from a local Malian of sound body into a Spartan outcast, a grotesquely disfigured troll who by Spartan custom should have been left exposed as an infant to die. Leonidas points out that his hunched back means Ephialtes cannot lift his shield high enough to fight in the phalanx. This is a transparent defense of Spartan eugenics, and convenient given that infanticide could as easily have been precipitated by an ill-omened birthmark. Victor Davis Hanson, a National Review columnist and former professor of classical history at California State University, Fresno, wrote the foreword to a 2007 reissue of the graphic novel and said that the film demonstrates a specific affinity with the original material of Herodotus in that it captures the martial ethos of ancient Sparta and represents Thermopylae as a clash of civilizations. He remarked that Simonides, Aeschylus, and Herodotus viewed Thermopylae as a battle against Eastern centralism and collective serfdom, which opposed the idea of the free citizen of an autonomous polis. He also said that the film portrays the battle in a surreal manner and that the intent was to entertain and shock first, and instruct second. Turaj Darioui, who is now Baskerville Professor of Iranian History and the Persian World at the University of California, Irvine, criticized the film's use of classical sources by writing, some passages from the classical authors Aeschylus, Diodorus, Herodotus and Plutarch are spilled over the movie to give it an authentic flavor. Aeschylus becomes a major source when the battle with the monstrous human herd of the Persians is narrated in the film. Diodorus' statement about Greek valor to preserve their liberty is inserted in the film, but his mention of Persian valor is omitted. Herodotus' fanciful numbers are used to populate the Persian army, and Plutarch's discussion of Greek women, specifically Spartan women, is inserted wrongly in the dialogue between the misogynist Persian ambassador and the Spartan king. Classical sources are certainly used, but exactly in all the wrong places, or quite naively. The Athenians were fighting a sea battle during this. Robert McHenry, the former editor-in-chief of Encyclopaedia Britannica and the author of How to Know, said that the film is an almost ineffably silly movie. Stills from the film could easily be used to promote buns of steel, or AB Master, or Thigh Master. It's about the romanticizing of the Spartan ideal, a process that began even in ancient times, was promoted by the Romans, and has survived over time while less and less resembling the actual historical Sparta. Snyder stated in an MTV interview that the events are 90% accurate. It's just in the visualization that it's crazy. I've shown this movie to world-class historians who have said it's amazing. They can't believe it's as accurate as it is. Nevertheless, he also said the film is an opera, not a documentary. That's what I say when people say it's historically inaccurate. He was also quoted in a BBC News story as saying that the film is, at its core, a fantasy film. He also describes the film's narrator, Dilios, as a guy who knows how not to wreck a good story with truth. In an interview, Miller stated, "The inaccuracies, almost all of them, are intentional. I took those chest plates and leather skirts off of them for a reason. I wanted these guys to move and I wanted them to look good. I knocked their helmets off a fair amount, partly so you can recognize who the characters are." Spartans, in full regalia, were almost indistinguishable except at a very close angle. "Another liberty I took was, they all had plumes, but I only gave a plume to Leonidas, to make him stand out and identify him as a king. I was looking for more an evocation than a history lesson. The best result I can hope for is that if the movie excites someone, they'll go explore the histories themselves. Because the histories are endlessly fascinating." Kaveh Farik, in the paper The 300 Movie, Separating Fact from Fiction, noted that the film falsely portrayed the Greco-Persian Wars in binary terms: the democratic, good, rational us versus the tyrannical, evil and irrational, other of the ever nebulous, if not exotic, Persia. He highlighted 3 points regarding the contribution of the Achaemenid Empire to the creation of democracy and human rights. The founder of the Achaemenid Empire, Cyrus the Great, was the world's first emperor to openly declare and guarantee the sanctity of human rights and individual freedom. Cyrus was a follower of the teachings of Zoroaster, the founder of one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. When Cyrus defeated King Nabonidus of Babylon, he officially declared the freedom of the Jews from their Babylonian captivity. This was the first time in history that a world power had guaranteed the survival of the Jewish people, religion, customs and culture. He abolished slavery. Before the release of 300, Warner Brothers expressed concerns about the political aspects of the film's theme. Snyder relates that there was a huge sensitivity about East versus West with the studio. Media speculation about a possible parallel between the Greco-Persian conflict and current events began in an interview with Snyder that was conducted before the Berlin Film Festival. The interviewer remarked that everyone is sure to be translating this film into contemporary politics. Snyder replied that he was aware that people would read the film through the lens of current events, but no parallels between the film and the modern world were intended. Outside current political parallels, some critics have raised more general questions about the film's ideological orientation. Slate's Dana Stevens compared the film to The Eternal Jew, 1940, as a textbook example of how race-baiting fantasy and nationalist myth can serve as an incitement to total war. Since it's a product of the post-ideological, post-Xbox 21st century, 300 will instead be talked about as a technical achievement, the next blip on the increasingly blurry line between movies and video games. Roger Moore, a critic for the Orlando Sentinel, relates 300 to Susan Sontag's definition of fascist art. Indeed, the lambda sign on the Spartans' shields in 300 formed the inspiration for the official symbol of the far-right identitarian movement. Newsday critic Gene Seymour, on the other hand, stated that such reactions are misguided, writing that the movie's just too darned silly to withstand any ideological theorizing. Snyder himself dismissed ideological readings, suggesting that reviewers who critique a graphic novel movie about a bunch of guys stomping the snot out of each other using words like neocon, homophobic, homoerotic or racist are missing the point. Snyder, however, also admitted to fashioning an effeminate villain specifically to make young straight males in the audience uncomfortable. What's more scary to a 20-year-old boy than a giant god king who wants to have his way with you? The Slovenian critic Slavogiek pointed out that the story represents a poor, small country, Greece, invaded by the army of a much larger state, Persia, and suggested the identification of the Spartans with a modern superpower to be flawed. The writer Frank Miller said, "The Spartans were a paradoxical people. They were the biggest slave owners in Greece. But at the same time, Spartan women had an unusual level of rights. It's a paradox that they were a bunch of people who in many ways were fascist, but they were the bulwark against the fall of democracy." The closest comparison you can draw in terms of our own military today is to think of the red-caped Spartans as being like our special ops forces. They're these almost superhuman characters with a tremendous warrior ethic, who were unquestionably the best fighters in Greece. I didn't want to render Sparta in overly accurate terms, because ultimately I do want you to root for the Spartans. I couldn't show them being quite as cruel as they were. I made them as cruel as I thought a modern audience could stand. Michael M. Keemers, author of With Your Shield, or On It, Disability Representation in 300 in the Disability Studies Quarterly, said that the film's portrayal of the hunchback and his story is not mere ableism, this is anti-disability. Frank Miller, commenting on areas in which he lessened the Spartan cruelty for narrative purposes, said, "I have King Leonidas very gently tell Ephialtes, the hunchback, that they can't use him as a soldier, because of his deformity. It would be much more classically Spartan if Leonidas laughed and kicked him off the cliff." The portrayal of King Xerxes, right, was a subject of criticism. Snyder said of Xerxes, "What's more scary to a 20-year-old boy than a giant god king who wants to have his way with you?" From its opening, 300 also attracted controversy over its portrayal of Persians. Officials of the Iranian government denounced the film. Some scenes in the film portray demon-like and other fictional creatures as part of the Persian army, and the fictionalized portrayal of Persian King Xerxes I has been criticized as effeminate. Critics suggested that it was meant to stand in stark contrast to the portrayed masculinity of the Spartan army. Stephen Rea argued that the film's Persians were a vehicle for an anachronistic cross-section of Western aspirational stereotypes of Asian and African cultures. The film's portrayal of ancient Persians caused a particularly strong reaction in Iran. Various Iranian officials condemned the film. The Iranian Academy of the Arts submitted a formal complaint against the film to UNESCO that called it an attack on the historical identity of Iran. The Iranian mission to the United Nations protested the film in a press release, and Iranian embassies protested its screening in France, Thailand, Turkey, and Uzbekistan. The film was banned in Iran, with it being considered American propaganda. Reviewers in the United States and elsewhere noted the political overtones of the West against Iran's storyline and the way Persians are depicted as decadent, sexually flamboyant and evil in contrast to the noble Greeks. With black market copies of the film already available in Tehran with the film's international release and news of the film's surprising success at the US box office, the film prompted widespread anger in Iran. Azad Movani of Time reported, "All of Tehran was outraged. Everywhere I went yesterday, the talk vibrated with indignation over the film." Newspapers in Iran featured headlines such as "Hollywood declares war on Iranians" and 300 against 70 million, the latter being the size of Iran's population. Indino, an independent Iranian newspaper, said, "The film depicts Iranians as demons, without culture, feeling or humanity, who think of nothing except attacking other nations and killing people." 4 members of Majlis, the Iranian parliament, called on other Muslim countries to ban the film, and a group of Iranian filmmakers submitted a letter of protest to UNESCO regarding the film's misrepresentation of Iranian history and culture. The cultural advisor to Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad called the film an American attempt for psychological warfare against Iran. Movani identified 2 factors that may have contributed to the intensity of Iranian indignation over the film. Firstly, she described the timing of the film's release, on the eve of Nowruz, the Persian New Year, as inauspicious. Secondly, Iranians tend to view the era depicted in the film as a particularly noble page in their history. Movani suggested that 300's box office success compared with Alexander's failure, another spurious period epic dealing with Persians, was cause for considerable alarm, signaling ominous US intentions. According to The Guardian, Iranian critics of 300, ranging from bloggers to government officials, described the movie as a calculated attempt to demonize Iran at a time of intensifying US pressure over the country's nuclear program. An Iranian government spokesman described the film as hostile behavior which is the result of cultural and psychological warfare. Movani reported that the Iranians with whom she interacted were adamant that the movie was secretly funded by the US government to prepare Americans for going to war against Iran. An example of the "This is Sparta" meme spawned from one of the movie's scenes. 300 has been spoofed in film, television, and other media, with the scene of Leonidas kicking the Persian herald into a pit in particular spawning the "This is Sparta" internet meme during the late 2000s. Skits based upon the film have appeared on Saturday Night Live and Robot Chicken, the latter of which mimicked the visual style of 300 in a parody set during the American Revolutionary War, titled 1776. Other parodies include an episode of South Park named D-Yikes, the short film United 300 which won the 2007 MTV Movie Spoof Award, and Boo! By Mad Magazine in its September 2007 issue #481, written by Desmond Devlin and illustrated by Mort Drucker. 20th Century Fox released Meet the Spartans, a spoof directed by Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer. Universal Pictures once planned a similar parody, titled National Lampoon's 301, The Legend of Awesomest Maximus Wallace Leonidas. 300, particularly its pithy quotations, has been adopted by the student body of Michigan State University, whose nickname is the Spartans, with chants of "Spartans, what is your profession?" becoming common at sporting events starting after the film's release, and Michigan State basketball head coach Tom Izzo dressed as Leonidas at one student event. Nate Ebner, a football player with the New England Patriots in the National Football League and formerly with the Ohio State Buckeyes, was nicknamed Leonidas because of his intense workout regimen and his beard. In June 2008, producers Mark Canton, Gianni Nunnery and Bernie Goldman revealed that work had begun on a sequel to 300, Rise of an Empire. Legendary Pictures had announced that Frank Miller had started writing the follow-up graphic novel and that Zack Snyder was interested in directing the adaptation but moved on to develop and direct the Superman reboot and DC Extended Universe first installment Man of Steel. No directed instead, while Zack Snyder produced. The film focused on the Athenian admiral, Themistocles, as portrayed by Australian actor Sullivan Stapleton. The sequel, 300, Rise of an Empire, was released on 7 March 2014, and achieved box office success with $337 million grossed worldwide from a budget of $110 million, despite again receiving mixed reviews. I gave a 4-star rating to Sin City, the 2005 film based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller. Now, as I deserve, I get 300 based on another work by Miller. Of the earlier film, I wrote prophetically, "This isn't an adaptation of a comic book, it's like a comic book brought to life and pumped with steroids." They must have been buying steroids wholesale for 300. Every single male character, including the Hunchback, has the muscles of a finalist for Mr. Universe. Both films are faithful to Miller's plots and drawings. 300, I learn, reflects the book almost panel by panel. They lean so heavily on CGI that many shots are entirely computer created. Why did I like the first, and dislike the second? Perhaps because of the subject matter, always a good place to start. Sin City, directed by Robert Rodriguez and Miller, is film noir, my favorite genre, taken to the extreme. 300, directed by Zack Snyder, is ancient carnage, my least favorite genre, taken beyond the extreme. Sin City has vividly conceived characters and stylized dialogue. 300 has one-dimensional caricatures who talk like professional wrestlers plugging their next feud. The movie involves a legendary last stand by 300 death-obsessed Spartans against a teeming horde of Persians. So brave and strong are the Spartans that they skewer, eviscerate, behead and otherwise inconvenience tens of thousands of Persians before finally falling to the weight of overwhelming numbers. The lesson is that the Spartans are free, and the Persians are slaves. Although the Spartan idea of freedom is not appetizing, children are beaten to toughen them. But to return to those muscles. Although real actors play the characters and their faces are convincing, I believe their bodies are almost entirely digital creations. They have Schwarzeneggerian biceps, and every last one of them, even the greybeards, wear well-defined six-packs on their abs. I can almost believe the star, Gerard Butler, may have been working out at Gold's Gym ever since he starred as the undernourished Phantom of the Opera, but not 300, 200 or even 100 extras. As a result, every single time I regarded the Spartans in a group, I realized I was seeing artistic renderings, not human beings. Well, maybe that was the idea. The movie presents other scenes of impossibility. Look at the long shots of the massed Persians. There are so many they would have presented a logistical nightmare, how to feed and water them. Consider the slave-borne chariot that Xerxes pulls up in. It is larger than the imperial throne in the Forbidden City, with a wide staircase leading up to Xerxes. Impressive. But how could such a monstrosity be lugged all the way from Persia to Greece? I am not expected to apply such logic, I know, but the movie flaunts its preposterous effects. And what about Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro, himself? He stands around 8 feet tall, I guess, which is good for 500 BC. Santoro's height in life, 6 feet, 2.75 inches. He towers over Leonidas, Butler, so we know his body isn't really there. But what of his face? I am just about prepared to believe that the ancient Persians went in for the piercing of ears, cheeks, eyebrows, noses, lips and chins. But his eyebrow have been plucked and redrawn into black arches that would make Joan Crawford envious. And what about the mascara and the cute little white lines on the eyelids? When the Spartans describe the Athenians as philosophers and boy lovers, I wish they had gone right ahead to discuss the Persians. The Spartans travel light. They come bare-chested, dressed in sandals, bikini briefs and capes. They carry swords and shields. At the right time, they produce helmets which must have been concealed in their loincloths. Also apples. And from the looks of them, protein shakes. They are very athletic, able to construct a towering wall of thousands of dead Persians in hours, even after going to all the trouble of butchering them. When they go into battle, their pep talks sound like the screams of drunken sports fans swarming onto the field. They talk, as I suggested, like pro wrestlers, touting the big showdown between Edge and The Undertaker. Be afraid, they rumble, stopping just short of adding, be very afraid. They talk about going on the warpath unaware that the phrase had not yet been coined by American Indians. Their women, like Gorgo, Lena Headey, Queen of Leonidas, are as bloodthirsty as their men, just like wrestlers' wives. All true enough. But my deepest objection to the movie is that it is so blood-soaked. When dialogue arrives to interrupt the carnage, it's like the seventh inning stretch. In slow motion, blood and body parts spraying through the air, the movie shows dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands, of horrible deaths. This can get depressing. In old movies, ancient Greeks were usually sort of noble. Now they have become lager louts. They celebrate a fascist ideal. They assume a bloodthirsty audience, or one suffering from attention deficit. How many December Ellings do you have to see to get the idea? They have no grace and wisdom in their speech, nor dignity in their bearing. They strut with arrogant pride. They are a nasty bunch. As Joe Mantegna says in House of Games, you're a bad pony, and I'm not gonna bet on you. That's right before he dies, of course. In the ancient Battle of Thermopylae, King Leonidas and 300 Spartans fight against Xerxes and his massive Persian army. In the Battle of Thermopylae of 480 BC, an alliance of Greek city-states fought the invading Persian army in the mountain pass of Thermopylae. Vastly outnumbered, the Greeks held back the enemy in one of the most famous last stands of history. Persian King Xerxes led an army of well over 100,000. Persian King Xerxes before war has about 170,000 army, men to Greece, and was confronted by 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans. Xerxes waited for 10 days for King Leonidas to surrender or withdraw, but left with no options, he pushed forward. After 3 days of battle all the Greeks were killed. The Spartan defeat was not the one expected, as a local shepherd, named Ephialtes, defected to the Persians and informed Xerxes that the separate path through Thermopylae, which the Persians could use to outflank the Greeks, was not as heavily guarded as they thought. Siberian 2005. 480 BC. When a Persian envoy arrives at the gates of Sparta, Greece, demanding submission to King Xerxes, brave King Leonidas sends word to the Persian ruler that Spartans will never give up their rights over their land. As enraged King Xerxes dispatches armed to the teeth multitudes of Persian soldiers to Thermopylae, a narrow coastal passage of strategic significance, King Leonidas and just 300 of his finest royal bodyguards march against the invading army, refusing to bow to the all-powerful enemy. And although the Spartans were vastly outnumbered, King Leonidas' men crushed wave after wave of superior Persian forces, a fierce, winner-take-all confrontation that would go down in the annals of history as the legendary Battle of Thermopylae. Nick Reganas. In 480 BC, the Persian King Xerxes sends his massive army to conquer Greece. The Greek city of Sparta houses its finest warriors, and 300 of these soldiers are chosen to meet the Persians at Thermopylae, engaging the soldiers in a narrow canyon where they cannot take full advantage of their numbers. The battle is a suicide mission, meant to buy time for the rest of the Greek forces to prepare for the invasion. However, that doesn't stop the Spartans from throwing their hearts into the fray, determined to take as many Persians as possible with them. Rm Lona 300 starts with a voiceover explaining how Spartan boys turn into real Spartan men. When the child is born, he is observed thoroughly by a Spartan baby inspector over a cliff where hundreds of feet below lay the bones of dead babies who did not make the cut. If there are any signs of weakness, sickness, or problems with the baby, he will be killed. The boys learn how to fight and train at an early age, and when they turn 7, they are separated from their mothers where they train some more and go through an initiation of rites before they can return home. Life is moving along in Sparta when a Persian messenger rides through the city and asks to speak to King Leonidas, Gerard Butler. The messenger and his guards are led to the king where he explains that he is here on behalf of Xerxes, the Persian god /king who wants the people of Sparta to bow down to him. When Queen Gorgo, Lena Headey, makes a comment, the messenger gets upset and asks how a woman can talk like that among men. The messenger warns King Leonidas to carefully think before he replies to what Xerxes has asked of Sparta, but the king turns on the messenger and points his spear in his face, making the Persian back up to the edge of the black pit. Leonidas roars back, "This is Sparta," before he shoves the Persian, and his guards, into the pit. There is a law among Sparta where if the king wants to go to war, he has to consult the oracle and the Iphas, who are more creature than man. The oracle is the most beautiful young girl of Sparta, and her beauty is also her curse as she is forced to stay up in the mountains with these ugly Iphas, most of the time drugged or drunk, to be able to tell these truths or futures. Leonidas climbs the mountains and after giving the Iphas gold and explaining his plan to go north to corner Xerxes' army, he asks what the oracle says. The Iphas say that he cannot go to war when there is a celebration coming up anyways. The king is upset as he cannot just sit and do nothing. Councilman, Theron, Dominic West, paying the Iphas with gold, from the Persians, for telling the king that he cannot go to war. King and queen do not trust Theron, and rightly so as he turns out to be a traitor to Sparta. The next morning, Leonidas and his captain, Vincent Regan, are looking through his army of 300. He notices that one of the men is the captain's son and the king comments that he is too young and has not fully enjoyed the warmth of a woman, but the captain insists that he fight. Theron and the other councilmen join the king and ask what he is doing. The king says he's merely out for a stroll and that these 300 men are just his personal bodyguards. Theron sarcastically asks where the king will be walking to and he replies to the north. The Persians are coming from the sea. On the beach there is a narrow opening, the sides surrounded by huge rocks. There is no other way for the enemy to get through except via the narrow opening. That's where the king and his 300 Spartans will be. While they are marching out they meet with another group, the Arcadians. The leader of the Arcadians says they heard that Sparta was going out to fight against Xerxes and they are here to join. Meanwhile the queen wants to talk to the councilmen to ask if they will send an army to help Leonidas fight against the Persian army. She has one of the councilmen try to set up the meeting and he says that she will be able to speak in 2 days. She says that the king may not have 2 days. When the group finally get to the beach area, the Arcadians are starting to doubt themselves when they see how many Persian boats are in the ocean. That night, a huge storm turns over and destroys some of those boats, but the number of boats seemed to have not diminished. As they are setting up a wall of stone, someone from Xerxes' army comes up to demand, once again, that Sparta bow on their knees. Xerxes admires their arrogance and strength and promise that Sparta will be the wealthiest city and that he will leave the city's women and children alone if only they lay down their weapons and look to him as leader. One of the Spartans cuts off the messenger's arm and orders him to tell Xerxes that the fight is on. Some of the Spartans notice that someone is following them. It turns out to be Ephialtes, a hunchback monster who wants to help fight. He warns the king that there is another opening that the Persians can get through. He has a strong thrust with his spear but cannot raise up the heavy shield he carries. The king says he cannot fight with the Spartans, because the Spartans use their shields to cover not only themselves, but also cover the man to their left, and since Ephialtes cannot raise his shield, he is of no use. Ephialtes gets extremely upset. In the first battle, in the narrow opening they stand and wait while the first group of Persian armies come out to fight. They easily beat that army, killing all and losing no one. While they catch their breath, the rest of the Persian army shoots out so many arrows that they block the sunlight. In unity, the Spartans fend off the arrows with their shields. Xerxes comes out to meet with Leonidas. Xerxes is a 7-foot bald and pierced god / king. He again offers Leonidas a chance to bow down to him. Xerxes is angry and says that he can wipe out Sparta and no one on earth will ever know about them, will never know who they are. The next battle is against the Immortals. The Spartans easily defeat these enemies, though they do lose some of their men. As Xerxes watches on, the narrator says that this godlike deity feels a human chill go up his spine. The next fights have the Persians bringing on as much power as they can using rhinos, magic, elephants from halfway around the world, monsters. When Xerxes sees the army losing, he disciplines his generals by chopping off their heads. During one of these battles, the captain's son's head gets chopped off and he cries out as his heart is broken. While both sides retreat once again, King Leonidas calls out to one of his men, Dilios, who got hurt in one of the fights. He asks how Dilios is, which he replies, "It's just an eye." The king asks him to return home to tell the tale of Sparta, to tell everyone, all the Greeks, his story and his 300 men. He knows that they are going to die, and though he is sad he will not see his wife, he is happy to be doing what he is doing, for Sparta. He gives back the necklace his wife gave him to Dilios to return to her. Meanwhile the queen is meeting with the Ron. She offers him something to drink, to which he asks if it's poison. He says that the councilmen will never allow an army to go to the king, and he insinuates that he can persuade them to if she sleeps with him. She allows it and he roughly starts to have sex with her. Ephialtes has gone to Xerxes. In the tent there are belly dancers, concubines, contortionists, transsexuals, slaves, etc. He is in awe of everything Xerxes has to offer: wealth, women, a chance to fight if only he bows down to him. Ephialtes, mesmerized by everything, agrees and tells him about the second opening where the Persian army can easily overpower the Spartans. The next day the queen gets to meet with the councilmen. She gives a great speech to why they should allow the army to go and help the king. When she ends her speech, Theron sarcastically applauds her. He turns against her by saying that why should anyone listen to her as she is an adulteress. He tells everyone that she came on to him and offered herself to him, but that he is an honest man and turned her down. She grabs one of their swords and stabs Theron in the stomach. When she pulls out the sword, his money pouch also comes free, and as he falls, so do the Persian coins that he's been bribed with. The other councilmen pick one of the coins up and realize he's a traitor, and word spreads quickly. The Persian army is surrounding the 300. Once again Xerxes comes out to watch, and one of his minions asks Leonidas to bow down to Xerxes. But this time Leonidas actually takes off his headgear and puts down his shield and spear and kneels down. But only to compose himself as his huddled group of Spartan men break way, and one member runs up and jumps on Leonidas's back to spear that minion to death. As everyone starts fighting again, the king picks up his spear and throws it where it slices through Xerxes' cheek, but does not kill him. Xerxes is surprised and holds his hand up to his bleeding face. One by one the Spartans fall, even the king. One of them tells him that it is an honor to die at his side, to which the king replies that it was an honor to live at his side. After facing the sun and saying his last words, "My love," the rest of the Persian army kills him, and they make sure all the Spartans are dead by shooting a gazillion arrows into the air again. Dilios returns home to give the queen the necklace, and he spreads the word about their victory. It ends 1 year later, where Dilios looks like he's the leader of the Spartan army now, and they are getting ready to fight the Persians again. But this time there are thousands and thousands of Spartans, and on command they run for battle. Where do I begin? After all the initial movie reviews and hype surrounding the opening of 300, what else is there to say? Let me begin by saying the movie definitely lives up to the fervor surrounding it. You want action? You got it. You want crazy, vivid battle scenes? You got it. You want ripped, hot and sexy actors, for the men who like men and ladies, and actresses, for the ladies who like ladies and men? You got it. Basically, everything you could want, it all rolled up and packaged nicely into a 2-hour film. As you know, or will know now, 300 is movie adaptation of a graphic novel by none other than Frank Miller. The novel is loosely based on the real Battle of Thermopylae and inspired by the movie The 300 Spartans. It chronicles the futile stand of King Leonidas, Gerard Butler, and 300 Spartan warriors against the hordes of Persia led by Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro. This stand ultimately wins the war, as it provided the time for the Greek city-states to assemble their armies and navies and repel the advancing Persians. But enough about history, let's talk about the movie. Visually, the movie is shot in a similar fashion as Sin City, another Frank Miller adaptation. The lighting is muted, scenery is glossy and spectacular, and intense detail is spotlighted on areas the director wants your eyes to travel. It is evident 300 has spent countless hours being edited and altered on a Macintosh to ensure the perfect dramatic effect has been placed at exacting moments and proper angles. I can't see a single scene that doesn't appear to be CGI shaped in some fashion, even if it didn't necessarily need it. Action-wise, this movie is filled to the brim. Aside from 10 to 20 minutes worth of backdrop in Sparta involving Queen Gorgo, Lena Headey, and the council, everything else is violence. I've seen it said elsewhere, or at least I think I have, but without a doubt, a tightly choreographed dance of death and dismemberment await all those that go to see this. The scenes are extravagant and overloaded. Yet, through it all, the blood and gore is presented in an almost comic fashion. The blood looks like paint droplets, and its spray and splatter seems to move in unison with the mayhem all about. The characters, for the most part, are interchangeable. After all, Sparta men are warriors and there is little to discern one from another. It is rather disconcerting to see that everyone within the city are absolutely fantastic to look at. Every man is pumped up with chiseled features. The women are all slim and sleek with wonderfully long legs. If only I was born a Spartan, of course I would have been cast aside as all unworthy children were. As expected, there isn't much dialogue, yet the few words spoken by Leonidas are captivating and insightful. Hell, he's trying to keep 300 men motivated and ready to battle 100,000 foes. He'd better have something good to say. For the faint of heart and those who cannot escape reality, 300 is not the movie for you. Every scene is over the top and exaggerated, and it's done purely for visual effect. The speeches about Sparta are beyond blusterous. And, I'm no history major, but I'm guessing there is very little in the way of historical fact here. But it all works. It all works very good. Kudos to Zack Snyder, the director, for presenting us with a well-painted portrait. When ancient Greece was the cradle of democracy, it was threatened by the Persian god King Xerxes. Rodrigo Santoro, Carandiru Paulo on TV's Lost, who sent a messenger, Peter Mensa, Tears of the Sun Hidalgo, to Spartan King Leonidas, Gerard Butler, Dear Frankie the Phantom of the Opera, promising him power and riches if he would just kneel before him. But the warrior Spartans were free men, and Leonidas defied his council and the oracle to stand and fight with only 300. Using the same techniques that brought graphic novelist Frank Miller's Sin City to the big screen, co-writer, with Kurt Johnstad and Michael Gordon, /director Zack Snyder, 2004's Dawn of the Dead, produces a far more awe-inspiring result by taking history and making it legend. If forgiven some fanboy pandering and homophobia, 300 is a magnificent spectacle and testament to heroic sacrifice in the name of freedom. Dilios, David Wenham, the proposition, the storyteller of the bunch, narrates Leonidas's early years, which also serve to educate on the training of the Spartan male. At birth, any sign of weakness condemns the child to death. At the age of 7, a boy is separated from his mother and sent into a world of violent military training. Using only his wits to survive a harsh winter, Leonidas slays a giant wolf by leading it into a rocky crevice, an event that foreshadows his later famous battle. After insulting Xerxes by killing his messengers, Leonidas is forbidden by law to go into battle, but Queen Gorgos, Lena Headey, the brothers Grimm Imagine Me and You, advice mirrors his own morality, and so he goes for a walk with a few hundred bodyguards. Arriving at the hot gates of Thermopylae, where they will have a geographical advantage over approaching Persians, Leonidas is finally approached by the man who has been following them. Ephialtes, Andrew Tiernan, the pianist, is a deformed hunchback. Think the bulkier counterpart to Ring's Skolem, a Spartan saved when his mother fled his homeland, who begs to fight with Leonidas's men and tells of the goat path which allowed him to approach from their rear. Leonidas offers Ephialtes other roles but denies his request, and a traitor is born. 300 has been dazzling up until this point, with its hyperreal desaturated look which renders people fantastically while accentuating every pore. The white eyes of the messenger seem to glow in the dark against his black skin, while the texture of a Persian emissary's, Tyrone Benskin, face is seen as if under a microscope. The oracle, a young woman in flowing gown, seems to float as if suspended in a tank of water. The wolf slain by Leonidas is a fairy tale creature of red eyes and suggestive shadow. But once the battle begins, a series of conflicts that come in waves, we are treated to one amazing sight after another. A Persian whip flicks right off the screen, Persian soldiers are pushed off a cliff in stylized relief, a rain of arrows blots out the sun. The most amazing special effect is Xerxes himself, a towering, oiled and eyelinered figure whose throne platform is carried on the backs of slaves who act as steps as the god-king descends. Xerxes is adored with piercings, chains and jewels and speaks in a synthesized voice. And herein also lies a problem. The Spartan ethic as reflected here is uncomfortably close to an Nazi-Aryan attitude against physical deformity and homosexuality, with Xerxes' appearance and hedonistic ways suggesting an alternative lifestyle. Ephialtes is seduced within an orgy of amorous women. The tendency towards Lord of the Rings style visuals, Ephialtes, the monstrous executioner, Leon Laderac, Monkeybone, otherworldly rhinos and elephants, while entertaining, is distracting from a story strong enough for its own brand of realism. But 300 still succeeds, aided by the strong central performance of Gerard Butler, who makes Leonidas a leader worth dying for. These may be a macho bunch of guys prone to sports arena-style chanting, but they are undeniably courageous. In addition to the truly fine Butler, standouts include Vincent Regan, Troy Unleashed, as the captain, devastated when his eldest, Astinos, Tom Wisdom, falls, and Michael Fassbender's striking stylized. Lena Headey epitomizes the strong Spartan woman, and Dominic West, Mona Lisa Smile the Forgotten, gives charismatic shading to his traitorous politician. The film's production design is extraordinary, all sets and computer imagery, and Larry Fong's cinematography and William Hoy's We Were Soldiers I, Robot, editing are seamless, Hoy's cuts sometimes humorous. Zack Snyder made quite the auspicious directorial debut with his terrific Dawn of the Dead remake, but 300 catapults him into a whole new league. It should be noted that 300 will be appearing on IMAX, as well as traditional screens, and if ever there was a movie that deserved the IMAX treatment, this is it. Fanboys, and those few fangirls, of Frank Miller's, with Lynn Varley, graphic novel, 300, rejoice. You are about to be dazzled by the CGI recreation of that book that will wow the fans on both big and small screens. Sophomore Helmer Zack Snyder, Dawn of the Dead, 2004. Pulls out all of the blue screen stops in his visually stunning adaptation of the story of the 300 Spartan warriors that, with scant support from the other Greek city-states, stood against the most powerful army in the world. 300 starts out with the making of a warrior king as we watch young Leonidas, Eli Snyder, being trained by his father, Tim Connolly, in the art of war. As he grows into early manhood, the 15-year-old king-to-be, played by Tyler Max Neitzel, is taken from the arms of his mother and immersed in the Spartan way of life. The stoic, intense training pays off when the grown-up Leonidas, Butler, is called upon to blunt the pending invasion by Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro, and his huge army. He gathers 300 of his finest soldiers and they set off into harm's way. The result is a solid mix of live action and computer animation. The Lord of the Rings Braveheart, the Road Warrior and Gladiator came to mind more than once as I watched the drama of the Battle of Thermopylae unfold on the big screen. But, for 300 this imitation is to be praised as Snyder and his own army of artists, actors and animators create a film that really has the look and feel of a highly stylized graphic novel. Color is used sparingly in the film's palette, accentuating the bright reds of the Spartan cloaks, helping giving the film its distinctive book look. CGI fans are going to love 300 as will the fanboys who get a goodly dose of the gratuitous sex, nudity and ultra-violent combat that they hope for. The computer animation is slick as heck with the massive Persian army bringing huge battle elephants and, if you can believe it, a battle rhino into the fray. The giant, armored rhinoceros is no match for the Spartans, though. The filmmakers do a seamless job in joining the upfront live action with the visually complex computer-driven background. Tech credits are top-notch, The acting, surprisingly, skirts the camp route as the principal characters are given personality if not much dimension. Gerard Butler is quite good as King Leonidas, lending the man dignity, bravery and loyalty as he accepts his and his men's annihilation with plucky courage and humor. It is a very different role than his Phantom of the Opera, and the actor has terrific screen presence here. Lena Headey is his beautiful, strong-willed and intelligent wife, Queen Gorgo, who is a politically correct character of an empowered woman, something that Sparta was not known to foster. The rest of the main cast, mostly Leonidas's warriors, are well developed, and Rodrigo Santoro giving an amusing, over-the-top performance as the arrogant, giant King Xerxes, chewing up the scenery during his time on screen. 300 may be aimed at the graphic novel's fans, and it squarely hits that 17 to 24 male mark, but it should also draw moviegoers who appreciate a well-made actioner that does a decent job in giving us a slice of ancient Greek history. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. So says a stone epitaph in Thermopylae, Greece, commemorating 300 Spartan warriors who sacrificed their lives in an epic battle against the invading forces of the Persian King Xerxes in 480 BC. Based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller, Sin City, 300 mythologizes and immortalizes these soldiers' absolute commitment to secure their homeland from tyranny. The story begins amid political discord. On the eve of Xerxes' invasion, a Spartan oracle has foretold doom if the city's king, Leonidas, sallies forth into combat during an important religious festival. But the ferocious Leonidas, the epitome of Sparta's fiercely disciplined martial culture, puts little stock in the god's supposed warning. Defying the oracle and the city's governing council, Leonidas takes leave of his wife, Queen Gorgo, a lioness in her own right, and marches with 300 men from his personal guard to meet the enemy. Leonidas' plan to defeat Xerxes' 100-nation force, which numbers in the hundreds of thousands, requires defending a narrow mountain pass near the sea known as the Hot Gates, Thermopylae in Greek. Joined by 700 volunteer fighters from Thespiae, Leonidas and his professional soldiers prepare to take their stand. Defeat is likely, but they believe their sacrifice will buy time for the city-states of Greece to rally a larger army, a cause Gorgo pursues in her husband's absence. The Spartans' fabled military prowess handily repels the first waves of Xerxes' army. Neither Xerxes' elite immortal troops, cavalry, a rhinoceros nor even elephants can dislodge Leonidas and his men from the pass. Enter treachery and betrayal. History, and this movie, tells the rest. Leonidas and Gorgo repeatedly make impassioned speeches about the values Sparta holds dear. These include glory, reason, justice, respect, family and freedom. Bravery is hardly a strong enough word to describe these warriors' fearlessness. Dying on Sparta's behalf is the highest possible honor, which yields statements such as Gorgo's words to her husband as he departs, "Come back with your shield or on it." Spartan war tactics depend on interdependence. Leonidas says, a Spartan's strength is the warrior next to him. The king's willingness to sacrifice himself for his men contrasts with Xerxes' megalomania. The Persian ruler willingly sends hundreds to their death with no concern for their welfare. The only men Leonidas invites to join his war party are those with sons, lest any family's line be wiped out. Leonidas and Gorgo enjoy a strong marriage as equals, in a culture that's known for generally treating women as second-class citizens. Leonidas also displays affection for his 6-year-old son. And he teaches him, fear is constant. Accepting it makes you stronger. A soldier known as Captain regrets never telling his son, who's perished in battle, how he truly felt. "I don't regret that he died. I regret that I never told him I loved him the most. He stood by me with honor. He represented all that was best in me. A mortally wounded Spartan says to his king, "It is an honor to die by your side." Leonidas replies, "It's an honor to have lived at yours." The only words Leonidas wants delivered to his people are simply, "Remember us." Spiritual content in 300 revolves around two axes: the Greek belief in a pantheon of gods and oracles who communicate with them, and Xerxes' insistence that he is a god to be worshipped. Leonidas visits an oracle, an entranced young woman who's tended to, more on that below, by horribly disfigured men called Iphas. While there, Leonidas is told, "Trust the gods. Your blasphemies have cost us enough already." The king dismisses the Iphas as diseased old mystics. In passing, Leonidas tells his troops to pray to the gods. A storm that sinks many Persian ships is attributed to Zeus' wrath. Xerxes is frequently described, by himself and his underlings, in divine terms, such as God of gods, and he mimics scriptural language when he says things about himself such as, "The Lord of hosts is prepared to forgive all." He speaks of his divine power and promises, almost like Satan's temptation of Jesus, to make Leonidas the warlord of all Greece if he submits. His immortals are described as Persian ghosts, hunters of men's souls. The oracle is barely clothed in a gauzy sheet that reveals her breast. It's implied that the Iphas use her sexually at will, and one licks the oracle's neck as she delivers her prophecy. A graphic sex scene between Leonidas and his wife includes movement, his uncovered rear, and several shots of her breasts. Xerxes invites Ephialtes into his harem and uses promises of sexual pleasure to get him to betray the Spartans. Several women are topless and kiss one another in this sensual, orgy-like scene, others are nearly naked. Queen Gorgo's chief opponent on the council is a devious man named Theron. In exchange for his help, she allows him to have his way with her. It's implied, as he violently grabs her, that he's virtually raping her. We briefly glimpse her robe fall to the ground. Spartan women, especially the queen, wear cleavage-bearing robes without undergarments. The Spartan warriors themselves fight shirtless, and the camera often focuses on their physiques. An offhand reference is made to Athenians being boy lovers. Let's put it this way, neither torsos nor appendages fare well in 300. Perhaps thousands of soldiers find themselves on the receiving end of spears, swords and arrows for about an hour and 15 minutes of this 2-hour film. A giant is knifed in the eye. Extremities get hacked off, at least 3 heads, half a dozen arms, legs, hands, etc. After one decapitation, the father of that soldier cradles his son's headless body, the head lies nearby. Spartans repeatedly wander the battlefield skewering unfortunates who've not quite perished yet. No mercy is a Spartan watchword. Add to such brutality scenes depicting piles of corpses, some skewered on stakes, others attached to a tree with arrows, and still others used to construct a defensive wall, and you've an epic amount of violent imagery in this film. Non-battlefield violence includes Leonidas spearing a wolf in the mouth as a youth, 7-year-old Spartans in training pummeling and bruising each other, older boys receiving whip lashings to learn how to resist pain, a soldier's wound being cauterized by white-hot metal, and Queen Gorgo stabbing, and killing, a traitorous Spartan. When a herald of Xerxes arrives in Sparta dangling a chain of skulls for emphasis, Leonidas shoves him and several members of his party into a seemingly bottomless pit. Xerxes' executioner is a monstrosity of a man whose arms have been replaced with blades, which he dutifully uses to dislodge heads of failed generals. In telling a story about a war hundreds of years before the time of Christ, filmmakers weren't able to logically include abuses of his name. Likewise, they knew it'd be a pretty far stretch to include F words or S words. So this R-rated in every other way movie fades to credits with only one mild profanity, Uva, to its name. Leonidas describes the Oracle as a drunken adolescent girl, and she definitely looks as if she's in an artificially induced stupor. During the orgy sequence in Xerxes' tent, some of the people in the background hold goblets presumably containing wine. Sparta's devotion to warcraft has a terrible dark side. When baby boys are born, they're evaluated for physical defect. Imperfect newborns are discarded into a pit to die. We see a pile of skulls indicating this happens regularly. Spartan law also makes retreat from battle illegal. Not surprisingly, revenge and glory are closely connected. When Captain tells Leonidas, "I fill my heart with hate," the king replies, "Good." Ephialtes is a disfigured, hunchbacked man whose father was a Spartan but fled the city because he refused to kill his misshapen son. He raised Ephialtes to be a true Spartan warrior. But the man's deformities prevent him from functioning as an equal. Embittered, Ephialtes betrays his people. The queen is greeted with derision by the Spartan ruling council, which normally would refuse to let any woman, even a queen, speak to them. When Theron betrays her before the council, she spits in his face. Both the Iphas and Theron are secretly taking bribes from Xerxes to keep the Spartans out of battle. I can't remember the last time I went to a movie so violent and tragic. But that's only the first half of the sentence. Because afterwards, I watched as scores of moviegoers, mostly men, walked to their cars laughing and pounding each other on the back. You'd have thought we'd all just seen Top Gun for the first time. Such is the influence of the latest big-screen Frank Miller adaptation, a hyper-violent, hyper-masculine ode to honor and duty by way of blood, blood and more blood. Did I mention the blood? Stylistically, 300's Melis recall the Wachowski brothers' Matrix trilogy and V for Vendetta. Just as those films raised the visual effects bar, so 300 could well become a new cinematic benchmark. Combat feels dance-like in its choreography, alternating between real-time and slow motion. This results in highly stylized violence, which is all the more emphasized by plumes of blood erupting from combatants' wounds. Regarding the film's look, director Zack Snyder commented, "It's not trying to be reality. The blood is treated like paint on a canvas. It's not Saving Private Ryan." Snyder also admitted he was more interested in creating visually compelling shots than he was recreating historically accurate fight scenes. "It's bulls, he said of some combat elements, but it looks good. Looking good felt to me like Gladiator on steroids, with several graphic sex scenes tossed in to add titillation." Despite its consistent and at times moving emphases on duty and sacrifice, family and freedom, this bloodbath epic remains so thoroughly saturated with visceral imagery that those virtues risk getting buried in battle. Given that, I think I can safely say that the enthusiasm of the crowd I witnessed had much less to do with the film's positive themes than the fact that the filmmakers have managed to make slaughter and sensuality look so very cool.